As I said, probably not to you because I wasn't here at these particular Masses, but Lent is coming. Ash Wednesday is this Wednesday. We're almost beginning this unique time and event where people panic last minute to figure out something simple, that they're going to give up something, but instead of taking the time to think it through. By the way, just to let you know, Lent is something we should be doing all year round. We just do it more during Lent. That taking that time to sacrifice, to give up. Prayer, fasting and abstinence, and almsgiving are traditional ways in which we are called during Lent and throughout the year, of course, but are called to come closer to God. Father Carlos probably spoke last week about the first of 4 habits of prayer, taking the first traditional Lenten practice. But the first one is to acknowledge, just to see yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, to hear your heart, your desires, your thoughts, your feelings, to acknowledge what's going on inside of you. But it's part of, always remember, it's part of 4 different habits that work together. The second habit is to relate it to God, to bring it to God. See, we don't go and mine our own personal good, bad, and ugly just so that we can just know ourselves or beat ourselves up, as the case may be sometimes in our lives. We go there because in that is a treasure when we take it to God. God wants us to know ourselves, good, bad, and ugly, so that we can then take it to God. Now, is that easy? Is it easy to face yourself, especially the stuff you don't like? Is it easy? Is it? Do you find it easy? How many people find that incredibly easy? It isn't easy. Most of the times we want to only talk to God about the good things in our life. Look at this God. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Sometimes we kind of weird in our society. We like to say, oh, I'm not good. And there's some sense of false humility. True humility is just kind of knowing where you're at and not making more or less of it, but just being honest. Sometimes that's forced upon you. If anybody who's ever been through an illness of any sort, we hear in the readings today about leprosy. It forces you to deal with the reality of your life. When you get something serious like leprosy where it disfigures you, in the case of the people of Israel, they had to quarantine people, that they couldn't be a part of the community, and it was quite, what we would consider quite harsh, yet we do quarantines too. If there is some sort of infectious disease going on, we try to quarantine. The more serious it is, the more serious we quarantine because it's a protection. It still goes on today, by the way. Father Rosica talked in one of his homilies, speaking about the readings this week, of experience he had when he was in the Middle East, in Egypt. And he went and actually was taken by these nuns to a place where there are still people who are disfigured and outcast in a society from leprosy and other diseases and stuff like that. And he was brought to them, and it was just such an intense experience. Still to this day, when we have a cure or a way to manage leprosy, or Hansen's disease as it's often called, we still have places in the world where people are outcasts, like Molokai, other places like that used to exist more so. But he said that what was the most important, the sister said to him, is to touch them. Because of what's going on to them, they are so alone and they lose human contact. But there's ways within our own society. It's not just those obvious outside things. All of us, to some degree, carry the brokenness of humanity. What I call the ugly inside. What we don't want to face. We try to do everything to not deal with what's inside. But the powerful thing about it is that you don't have to do that alone. God will be with you. But in that moment when you come to face what's going on inside of you, you will encounter God in a profound way. It's an opportunity to have a real discussion with Him. Now, it's not like You're discussing these things to God because God doesn't know about them. But there is something, and I think most of us have experienced that sometimes we just need to say it out loud to someone who cares, to allow us to be free, to allow it to start to flow out of us, to allow it to heal. We need that opportunity just to speak and to be heard. In a more modern way, we say it is to be validated. But what I'm inside of me is real. It needs to be dealt with. Now think about what the leprous man. We get many of the readings, but we don't get the intensity of the emotion. If this was a movie, what would happen in the movie is we wouldn't come to this part right away unless it was a flashback sequence. But I don't think in this particular case it would be a flashback sequence because it's such an intense experience of coming to Jesus. But you might have a flashback or start in the story when this man may not have had leprosy, when his life was cool and maybe comfortable. Where would this man come from? Was he poor? Was he rich? Was everything going great? Did he have a great basketball career ahead of him? Or what happened? But then all of a sudden, something happened. He gets this disease, and all of a sudden, all that changes. All that changes. He can't be a part of the community anymore. We do not know to what level of disfigurement or what he looked like. All we know is he was a leper. Think about that. What would have been going through that man's mind? Not just the moments, but probably the years in which he suffered with leprosy, that he had to force himself to not be part of that community. How did he deal with all that emotional kind of thing of where he was and what he was going through? What kind of talking to God did he have to do? We read the scriptures and we don't realize that there's a lot of intense stuff going on there. That what he must have had to go through to kind of figure out himself, to deal with all the things he wasn't dealing with inside before he could even come to Jesus like it talks about in the gospel today. Think about that. Think about your own life. How hard it is to talk to someone else that you love about something that's difficult. Imagine speaking your heart to God is equally as tough. It takes time of prayer. It's not without reason that 2/3 of the Psalms are called laments, that they reach the deepness of the sorrow and the difficulty of human life to bring it to God. And that's not easy, but real. What was going through this leprous man? What kind of prayer? What did it take in his prayer life to talk to God that he would risk his very life in the state that it was, but would risk his life to come out from the areas of quarantine, the areas of outcast, to work through the crowd, to come close to Jesus and ask him to heal him? And I would argue, I've been sitting with this a long time, why does God make it so hard? Why do we have to sometimes fight so hard to get somewhere sometimes? We all have this to different degrees, and it's good. We have to struggle. We have to fight to pray to God. I think of praying. We often think of praying, and we think, oh, lovey-dovey, little beautiful angels flowing around. And that happens. There are moments of that kind of comfortable prayer. There are moments where we have difficult prayer, but you know what we talked about in the psalm, when things get tough, all of a sudden we naturally have a motivation to talk to God when things get tough because we realize I can't handle that. And the moment we can or things get better, we stop talking to God. It's always the danger of that kind of prayer is that we pray to God only when things get tough instead of praying to God throughout that. Because the reality is things appear to be tough, that things appear to be overwhelming. That's when we finally go to God. Instead of always going to God, that whole process of who we are through our good, our bad, and the ugly in our lives. Because we can never, if we only go to God when things are horrible and bad, and that's the only time we talk to God, and the rest of the time we don't, we will not have the strength to pray through it all. Most people, all of us have experienced that because we all do that. We go to God, and it's so tough, eh? Isn't it tiring to start praying? You have the motivation, but it's also extremely tiring. The key, though, is when you actually start praying to God just all the time, when things are good as well. You'll find when things get bad, you'll do that. You'll pray more intensely because there's more motivation, but you'll find it easier. It'll still be work, but you will be having exercised your soul. But doing those things together, when we come to face and when we're ready, and those things bubble up, the most difficult things, the things that are ugly in our soul, the most things we have the most struggle with, we will begin to have the strength to speak it to God. And we don't need to speak it to God because God doesn't know what it is. We speak it. We speak it. Because in doing that, we release it to God. We actually give it to God. How much of our prayer, me included, do we not give to God what we are praying about? We give to God only a little bit. Okay, Lord, just take care of that. We may be tweaking. Oh, Lord, just take care of this. But the rest of this, leave it alone. But do we give to God the totality of who we are? You see, that's the power, and why it's difficult is because we are giving to God all that we are. Then you will understand more deeply when this man in the gospel who did that too. If you choose, you can make me clean. If you choose, you can make me clean. What a powerful prayer of acknowledging that God doesn't have to do what I want him to do. That God will do what he does or doesn't do. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But you trust enough that you give it to God, and God, do what you will. But if you choose, you can make me whole. What powerful faith this man in the gospel did and showed for us and is exemplified and reminded over and over again in the sacred readings. The thing about relating things to God, it's not the first time you do it. It's the fact you do it over and over again. For the little things, for the medium-sized things, for the big things, for the good, the bad, and the ugly in your soul. It's that practice of doing that so that when it comes to the point where it's something actually incredibly difficult to give up, you have the strength. You have the capacity to actually give it to God because you trust him, because you've trusted him in little things. By doing that and relating it to God and talking to God about your life, everything, you also allow God to come into your life so that you can give him the most difficult things. That second habit complements the first habit of just paying attention. I find it amazing in my own life that I have no problem talking to people that I know and talking about the difficulties of my life. But I do not always bring that to God. And my question to myself is, why? Am I trying to pretend to God that I'm not like this, that I don't have my own weaknesses and faults? Am I trying to pull one over on God? I don't know why. I think in my own life, part of it is I still don't completely get that God actually loves me and all that I am. And when we take that to prayer and we show that to God, one of the things you begin to realize is that God actually does love and care for me unconditionally. He already showed it to us on the cross, is what we are beginning to focus in profoundly to remember as a community, to make present in our lives. But he loves us unconditionally. But you know, the only way we ever realize that is when he has to do it in action in our lives. See, that's the powerful thing of prayer. When we acknowledge where we're at, that humility that can grow, and it takes a lifetime to truly become humble before God totally and utterly. But when we do that, we begin to realize in how much he reaches out to us, how much he touches us, how much he goes to us, how much he really loves us. It's funny. Isn't that the most amazing thing? It's only when we are the biggest screw-up and we finally acknowledge how much of a screw-up we are, how much we're not getting it, how much we're not doing it. It is in that particular moment, if we go to God, that we realize that God is bigger than that. And that we are bigger than our biggest mistake. That God's love shows to us truly who we are. But only if we have the courage, or we maybe better said, only if we build the courage in our lives to talk to God about everything that we are. Don't worry, you don't have to do it all at once. Especially those things that freak you out. Start with the good things. That might freak you out a bit. We're more comfortable with how bad we are because it justifies how much God or others might not love us. But let's start with the good and thank God for the good things he's given us and just begin to talk to him about that. When you're ready, talk to him about the little bit of uncomfortable things that are in your life, the bad maybe. By doing that, you'll begin to have strength and trust to bring him the ugly things. In that moment, you can go to Jesus and say, Jesus, Jesus. You can walk out to Jesus. You'll have the strength and the courage to say, if you choose, you can make me clean. Only when we take the time daily to talk to God will we begin to have the strength, the courage, the fortitude, and the love to take that to God. And then he can heal us because we're finally giving it to him. Then he can truly heal us. Regardless of whether he heals you or not, fully in the way you think he will, you will realize of his love and his blessing that he has for you. But let us acknowledge who we are, where we're at. Let's bring that to God in prayer.